Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Now, the world is watching as Donald Trump claims progress in what he calls a push for a true peace deal with Russia, not just a ceasefire. Now, with European leaders signaling both hope and caution ahead of Zelenskyy's high-stakes visit to Washington, we ask, is this diplomacy moving us closer to peace or simply giving Vladimir Putin more room to maneuver? Joining us now in the studio to help us analyze it all is Katarzyna Maniszewska, a lecturer in international relations, Civitas University. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Hello. So if we just take a step back, do you think that the summit from Alaska, did that bring us closer and bring the world closer to peace, or was it just legitimizing Putin?
That's a tough question, actually. But I really think we can look at it from both sides, actually. Like, the first and most important thing is, unfortunately, Putin got what he wanted in terms of material, footage for his disinformation campaigns, which he will gladly use, not only for the internal policy in Russia, but also to bring more divide in our Western societies, but also to reinforce his narrative in other countries, including the so-called global South countries. This is a very important point, as today's world and security landscape is very much interconnected, and we cannot abstract the war in Ukraine from the whole picture, the bigger picture, one could say. So this is one thing. The other thing is, though, that yes, I believe diplomacy can bring us closer, and perhaps this meeting was necessary to kind of open the stage again for negotiations. The good sign is that right after the meeting, President Trump talked to President Zelenskyy. So our fears that something would be potentially agreed without including Ukraine to the extent we think Ukraine should be included, it wasn't the case. So this, we have to admit, is a positive, I would say, outcome. And now the meeting that will follow up on Monday, I think this meeting will be absolutely crucial. Like, leaving the pictures, the very meme-generating pictures from the events in Alaska aside, the concrete things that are on the table now is really bringing us closer to the peace deal.
But at the same time, you said that in many ways that Putin got what he wanted, of course, the legitimizing him in a way, the flashy pictures, etc. But also to your point about it's good to have more diplomacy. But at the same time here, it seems very much that the main concern was we'd move towards a ceasefire. Now that seems to have changed. Yesterday we heard that's what Trump was hearing, like he wants a peace deal rather than the ceasefire. But how much is that bringing us closer to what Russia wants, not really what Ukraine wants?
It's again a tough question, but I think we should aim, by we I mean the international community, should aim at a peace deal. I agree with President Trump here. However, on this path to a peace deal, a potential ceasefire would also be an option. I also think that we both and our viewers, we don't have the full picture as we don't know what was exactly talked about. We know the statements by the European leaders, which I would say gives us some optimism in this whole situation. The European leaders firmly stand behind the US. They emphasize that Ukraine is the key stakeholder here. So we have to ensure the buy-in for any type of potential solution from Ukraine, but it is an opening to negotiations and, best case scenario, a peace deal that will be fair, long-lasting and sustainable, and not only aimed at, from the Russian perspective, at giving Russia more time to regroup, quote-unquote, and then strike again.
Well, but on those, I mean, as you said, the limited information we have and certain sources giving us this from different directions, it does seem that one of those things is that Putin very much is keen on certain land swaps and very much in the Donbass. And if we're looking at that as objective as we can, puts obviously the favor in Putin's hands. And the question is, will Ukraine ever agree to such a thing? I think Zelenskyy has already ruled that out.
Yeah, again, that's a question to Ukraine, to Ukraine leader and, well, politician and citizens of Ukraine, in fact. The thing I'm the most worried about is actually that we know that from Polish history. You cannot really trust Russia in international relations. I would sum up the Russian strategy now as deceive the enemy, presenting themselves as the defender of the oppressors. That's the narrative that Russia is perpetuating in many countries. And I'm not quite sure whether our American friends also understand this point to the full extent. That said, among the American administration, we also have people who are very much aware of Russian politics and all the tricks played by Putin and his men. Secretary Rubio, I would say, is one of them. So, in general, among Republicans, historically also, there is this understanding for Soviet Union and then Russia and Russian policy. Because when we look at it, in fact, not much has changed between the times of the Soviet Union and what Russia is doing now, and how Russia is trying to gain again the momentum of being an imperial state, using not only military means, but also all sorts of means of hybrid warfare, terrorism. Actually, my main focus of research is terrorism and counterterrorism. If that was not a state, we would clearly call that terrorist actions and terrorist organization, what they are doing. At the very same time, they are also pushing a public diplomacy offensive towards countries on the African continent, Latin American countries, Southeast Asia, where again they are presenting themselves as the defenders, as those who fight with the evil capitalism, let's say. This is exactly the same narrative that we know from the history.
So if we know it from history, which kind of now strikes the point earlier, you said diplomacy is the way to go, but yet we cannot trust Russia in many ways. And also what's echoing there is, if I just can share this is from the chief European policy chief, Kaja Kallas, who said that Russia has no intention of ending this war anytime soon. Based on what you've said as well, with the hybrid threats, what evidence do we have of that further, and what does that mean if the head of the European Union's diplomatic corps says something like that?
That means we really need to ensure buy-in from other actors in international relations. Not only look at the European Union and the US as the deal brokers, let's say here, but also look beyond. And by beyond, I don't even, well, I do mean the broader international community, but specifically I would look at Turkey. Being a NATO member and a country that could also give certain guarantees if we manage to convince our friends and partners in NATO from Turkey that this also would mean, like, long-lasting sustainable peace would also mean a win-win, basically, for all sides. We should, my opinion and my advice would be to try really to look a little bit beyond the European Union countries and the US to secure this deal. Russia is conflicted with many countries in the world, and this we could also take to our advantage.
I want to also come back to what we've also heard recently. I mean, one of the main things was security guarantees for Ukraine. This has been touted for months. We talk about this a lot. We just shared in the news service as well, Chancellor Merz saying that that's on the table, apparently Americans somehow involved, but we're not really sure the details of that. This is one of those sticking points, as you've just pointed out, to who guarantees that, what does that mean, what does that look like, and would Putin, in your mind, ever really agree to such a thing of anyone if it isn't his own troops there, or whose troops would it be?
Tricky question. We have too little information to make informed comments about that. But again, I would say to ensure buy-in from different actors, and at the end of the day, leave no other choice for the Russian Federation as only to agree to this deal. Unfortunately, I think those negotiations will be time-consuming. The most important point, I would say, is to still come to some sort of ceasefire now, to stop the killings.
And what if Trump says he doesn't want that?
To bring the children back. And this, here, you have also mentioned in your news services the letter from Melania Trump. I think this really is important and slightly overlooked in many news reports that we see. This is important. Symbols are also important. And here in this letter, we have clearly stated, hey, President Putin, we know about the atrocities you are committing. And this is one of the points that we have on the table. And this is one of the points that we really want to get resolved and settled now. We are speaking about children, so each month, each, I don't know, half a year will mean only more Russification of those children. And this is one of these issues that I think really has to be addressed immediately.
Well, we still don't know of any reaction of that letter at this point in time. We know that it was handed over. We don't know the reaction personally. But interesting point, as you said, that's also something that many have been also angling for, to try and release those children again. At the same time, let's go back to Europe for a minute. We have this coalition of the willing in Europe, various countries, including Germany, Poland, etc. There's going to be a digital meeting. I believe it's even going to be on Sunday today, before that meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump. So at this point, what do you expect out of that meeting? What more can the Europeans do at this point? What can they tell Zelenskyy? These calls, shuttle diplomacy, what's their ultimate aim? Are they effective in any way?
Yes, I believe they are effective. Perhaps the effects are a little bit protracted and we have to wait for the concrete results of this. But as I said, symbols are important. That the European leaders stress, emphasize once again that they stand behind Ukraine and that no decisions will be made without involving Ukrainians themselves. This is important. And I think in this regard, the role of Poland's diplomacy also can be further reinforced. Minister Sikorski also spoke about that a little bit. We are the main advocate, I would say, for Ukraine, not only in this part of the world, but also towards the United States as this ally, steadfast ally of the United States here. So we have to explain the situation, I would say, or quote unquote, explain, again, showing how important and vital also in the interest of the US it is to bring this sustainable, long-lasting peace to the table. At the very same time, I think that all the decisions that will be made eventually should be really concrete, and if Russia breaks the deal, consequences should follow. We cannot allow ourselves any longer to leave legal loopholes in sanctions. This really is important. The sanctions are, let's face it quite frankly, are not that effective as we would most probably hope, because there are all those legal loopholes everywhere and Russia is maneuvering around the sanctions. And with a little help of our friends from the US, I think we can tighten up and then bring Russia really to hold also to what will be decided. Well,
I mean, on the sanctions topic, that is having definitely an effect on the Russian economy, but at the same time, making that case to President Trump, that is the billion-dollar question, as they put it. But it is concerning that on the plane he said that he is not listening to Europe. They're not telling what to do. So we'll have to see ultimately what happens in these next very, very interesting few hours, the next 24 hours, really. Look, we'll have to close it there. Thank you so much. Katarzyna Maniszewska there. Thank you for your insights today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on World Talks. But stay tuned, much more coming out right here on TVP World. Goodbye.